right, my previous video for social psychology was about a descriptive typology of aggression. We're going to talk about different other types of typologies for aggression. One other alternative is a motivational typology. What are your motivations for the aggression? And so this focuses on why people are aggressive. And there are two basic categories in the motivational typology. One of them we call hostile or reactive aggression. And this is emotion-based. This is in the heat of the moment. Your emotions were so powerful that you acted out, you harmed somebody because of that emotional experience. This is an emotion-based reaction to perceived threats. And so this is like with hostile reactive aggression, you're not going into an interaction thinking, I'm going to be aggressive, I'm going to harm somebody, but something happens that upsets you and you react and you lash out or fight back. Maybe you go to have a conversation with somebody that you work with, and you walk in thinking, oh, this is going to be an everyday experience. I'm not going in to harm anybody. And they say something mean or horrible. They threaten you. Maybe they say that they're going to get you fired. Something that just really upsets you, and you lash out and you start yelling, verbal insults, which is a type of aggression, or you hit them or something. That would be hostile or reactive aggression. But you can also have more planned, intentional aggression. You can have instrumental or proactive aggression. With instrumental or proactive aggression, this is thoughtful, it is reason-based, you thought it out, it's not in the heat of the moment, and it's a decision. You decide to engage in aggression, a decision to harm others to get something, to gain resources, money, self-esteem, or social status. So your goal with instrumental, the instrumental means you're trying to get something. The instrumental part is that you want something. The proactive part is that it is planned. It is intentional in some way. So this is something like you go to your workplace with the plan of harming somebody, because could be something serious like you murder somebody to get them out of the way so that you can get their position, so that you can get that promotion that they were going to get. I mean, that's very serious, and hopefully none of you would ever do anything like that, but that would definitely be instrumental or proactive. It doesn't have to be something as serious as murder, but the idea is, you intend to do it and you're hoping to get something out of it. It could also be something like, hey, I'm going to steal from work. I'm going to steal some money because I want to get resources. I want to get their money. And you don't just do it in the moment. Like in the moment, you have a perceived threat and you see, oh, there's money right there. I could just grab it. Nope. Instrumental, proactive is where you're like, I have this plan. I'm going to steal from work, and you carry it out to get the money. All right. So that motivational typology is another way to think about different categories or types of aggression. We also have a relatively new one where we talk about microaggressions. You probably know that micro means like small or tiny. So these are tiny aggressions. Well, they're still harmful. The micro part is that they are brief, they are like short-lived, and they are everyday. They are worked into everyday experiences. They don't stand out as this really unique, act of unusual behavior or unusual harm or something. They are more subtle or covert. They're sneakier than the other types of aggression that we've been talking about. And they tend to reflect prejudice and discrimination, stuff we've talked about in previous chapters. And so there are different types of microaggressions. To give you some broad examples first, when I hear people talk about microaggressions, they will often just talk about general behaviors that kind of give you hints to someone's ignorance of other groups of people, or perhaps stereotypes. I know a lot of my friends who have hair different than mine because they are African American, so they do not have my flat hair that's always falling during the videos and I have to pull it back. They have much curlier hair. All right, and depending on how they style it, how they let it grow, sometimes it can look very curly. And sometimes people will do this thing that very much annoys them, and I'm speaking for other people, all right? So, this is not coming directly from the person, but I've had enough friends tell me about this experience where people are like, oh, I love your hair. And they go and touch it without permission. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. What makes you think you can just touch someone's hair? That is personal space. That's really rude and invasive. And it kind of conveys this attitude like, oh, you as a minority, you're not a real person with autonomy and independence. I don't have to ask your permission to touch you. A lot of pregnant individuals, too, will have those moments where people just walk up and touch their belly and they're like, whoa, whoa, this is my private space. What are you doing touching me? And it's this kind of this idea, like once you become pregnant, you belong to all of us and we will touch you. All right. And very importantly, when people do these things, and the touching the hair thing was even in that movie, Enchanted, the Disney movie, she goes and touches her hair. And I'm just like, I knew right away. My friend was like, did you see that? They didn't have the woman being offended. The people at the Disney, they didn't even know that would be an offensive thing. All right. But the people who engage in such behaviors, they're often kind of clueless. It doesn't even occur to them. It doesn't even occur to them that this could be harmful, that this could be indicating prejudicial beliefs. That's why it is different than, intentionally trying to harm somebody. But it's still harmful. It makes the person feel like, okay, so you don't even see me as a real person with autonomy. That's great. You can just walk into my personal space anytime you want. Great. All right, that is just one example. Let's talk about some specific types of microaggressions. All right, micro insults. Micro insults are rude statements. They can be sprinkled out throughout day-to-day activities that demean someone's heritage. This is when you just kind of state stereotype beliefs and things like that, even if they are false. Misperceptions as just part of everyday things. Like, somebody is at work and everybody's having a meal together and they reach for the hot sauce. And maybe they're a Mexican American and someone's like, oh yeah, you guys love your hot sauce. And it's like, well, we're all eating. Other people reach for the hot sauce. Why did you have to make that statement? And typically people would be like, well, that's not harmful. That's not the same thing as punching somebody in the face. That's not the same thing as trying to murder them. Why are people whining about little things? They are micro, but for someone who experiences a lot of micro insults over time, they do not make you feel good about yourself. They make you feel demeaned. They remind you of the way people see you as a member of that group and probably operate on a lot of stereotypes and things like that. So in addition to micro insults, we also have micro assaults. Now micro assaults are a little bit different because they are more like intentionally harmful. They're just smaller actions. So these are overt behaviors. They are out in the open. And they are meant to psychologically harm somebody. So this could be something like somebody's desk at work. You could just put like a little post-it note on it with like a little ethnic or racial slur. It's like this, it's a small thing and you're like, haha, and you might not even think it's a big deal. To the person though, it can be very upsetting. And the idea is you're not physically harming them, but you're just kind of making them feel like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not safe here. Maybe I'm not respected here. Okay, that's lovely. All right. Also like street harassment and things like that. You just walk around and somebody just makes one little comment and they're like, oh, hey, sexy or something, and people get a lot more creative with their street harassment, but something along those lines. And you're like, oh, okay, great. I wasn't thinking about that, but now I'm thinking about how people are seeing me that way. Awesome. Or if you're a fat person living in a fat body publicly, you don't manage to hide yourself well enough and you go to a store and buy food because you need food to survive, or maybe you're even buying food for other people. Maybe you're buying food for work. Maybe the workplace says, hey, you go and buy the donuts for today's meeting, and you're walking out with the donuts and somebody walks by and be like, don't eat them all at once, fatty, which has happened to many people. Many people in larger bodies have stories like that. And it's one of those things like people will say, well, what's the big deal? It's like, it's that little reminder of how people think of you in a not so positive way. It's insulting. It's demeaning. Now, you can also have micro-invalidations. Nice long word. All right. An invalidation. Your feelings are not real, sweetie. That's what invalidation is. They invalidate. They disregard the target's feelings on an individual or a group level. So this can happen when you point out other microaggressions or just prejudice, discrimination. You point out what is going on. And a micro insult is when somebody's like, that doesn't really happen. And even if they don't use those words, they might say things like, really? You know, like when the person says, yeah, I came to work and there was a Post-it note on my desk with a slur on it. And they're like, oh, I don't believe anybody actually did that. And it's like, I've got the Post-it note right here. I'm not being hysterical. This actually happened. Oh, they must not have meant it. You know, that sort of behavior. And when people have not experienced particular types of prejudice and discrimination, they are sometimes incredibly likely to invalidate other people's experience of prejudice and discrimination because it's so unthinkable to them. Like, who would do that? People don't actually act that way. I have never seen people acting that way. You know, when someone says, yeah, you know, some guy was just yelling at me for having donuts in my hand. And they're like, oh, come on. Are you sure they were talking to you? And they're like, this really happened. Can you believe? Just trust me that this happens. When people get bad care at like doctor's offices and things, because some minority groups do get less positive care when they go to the doctor, because even doctors can operate on stereotypes and prejudice and just harsh feelings towards particular groups of people, whether they realize it or not. And somebody will be like, yeah, the doctor was just dismissive to me and they won't do tests, even though I clearly should be having these tests. And they talked about other things. And depending on what group you belong to, you know, maybe they were assuming that you had some problems that you don't have. And people will be like, no, the doctors don't do that. Those are invalidations. Those invalidations are like, yeah, no, that doesn't, nobody's treating you that bad. It's kind of like gaslighting. If you've heard that term, gaslighting, that's when people are like, no, none of this is actually happening. It's all in your head. Gaslighting is named after a short story where a husband was manipulating his wife. He kept messing with the gas lights in their home, making them dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And the wife would be like, the lights are getting dimmer. He's like, no, they're not. And it was just one of these things to make her question her own sense, her own mind. Gaslighting. People will engage in gaslighting in a variety of situations. If someone ever tells you, no, your feelings are not valid, they're gaslighting you. Stand up for your feelings. They're real. This also includes things when you get offended by a joke. It could be a microaggressive type of joke. You get offended by a joke and someone says, and when I have in-person classes, I'll often open it up and I'll say, okay, folks, you get offended by a joke and you tell someone, hey, that joke's really offensive. What do they often say? And I often have multiple students who are like, they say, oh, it's just a joke. You can't take a joke. Saying something is just a joke is like the ultimate gaslighting, and it is a microaggression. It's a micro-invalidation. You were saying, oh, you're telling me that this joke hurt your feelings in some way? You should not feel that way. Your feelings are not valid. It is a form of aggression. It's a micro-invalidation. Think about that next time you see someone say, it's just a joke, because you probably see it a lot. I certainly do. All right, so that is the end of the content about types or typologies of aggression. And then we're going to move on to some other stuff about aggression, including some sort of overlap with biology, biological explanations for aggression that kind of overlap with what we see in animal behavior.